Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to continue to set up our logical volume manager on the new hard disk that was added to the VM. So just to recap, we first added a extra hard disk to the virtual machine. Then we partitioned that hard disk to connect it to the operating system. After the partitions, we created a directory to mount the Linux partition and mounted or turned on the swap partition. We then added those newly created partitions to the FS tab so they were persistent upon reboot. So let's take a look. First, let's take a look at our block devices. LS BLK. We see the original hard disk that's on the VM that is partitioned with two logical volume managers, LVMs, one for the root directory and the other one swap. And the second one that we partitioned with one swap and right now one Linux. If you remember, if we take a look at the F disk, we see that the new disk was partitioned into Linux, swap, and LVM. And we see the two LVMs on the original disk here, one for root and the other for swap. And if you take a look up a little higher, the other two partitions for the original OS disk. To show that they're mounted, let's clear the screen. We see that a Linux partition on dev SDB is mounted on storage, and we can go into storage, and we created a file, an empty file last time, and it still works. We can also create directories, and they are both here. We can also check the disk usage of this directory, which have these two directories in one file, and how much space we're using up a total of 24 kilobytes. So if you take a look at disk free, I forgot the dot, disk free in our present working directory, we see that dev SDB is mounted on storage, has 924 megabytes available. It was a 1 gig storage partition right here, and we're using 1.3 megabytes. All right. So let's get into creating the logical volume manager for this second hard disk. So the first thing we must do is create the physical volume. Just to be clear, dev SDB3 is the Linux LVM. So we have to create the physical volume on dev SDB3. So again, clear the screen. So to create the physical volume, the command is pv create. And we're just going to issue the path to the partition. Dev SDB DB3. It says that it was successfully created. So to view it will be PV display. We see dev SDA1, dev SDA, the original OS disk, and we have the second one, dev SDB3. It's not mounted on a volume group yet, and the size of it. Okay. Now that we've created the physical volume, the next step is to create the volume group. That is created with a VG create command. So VG create, the new volume group is going to be called resource. It's also going to be mounted on dev SDB3. It says that it was successfully created, and to check it, it's going to be the same VG display command. And it's going to show both volume groups. VG name is resource for the one that we just created. So LVM2. The entire size is 7 gigabytes. The original one, the VG name is called VG first. That's just what they chose to call it. When it was originally created, the entire size is 7.51 gigabytes. The next step, we are going to create the logical volume. And this command is a little bit longer, but the command is lv create minus capital L. It's because we're going to issue the size to the volume that we want to create. We issue the size. So we have 7 gigs. So in this scenario, we are going to create two logical volumes, both 2 gigabytes in size. Maybe one is going to be 2.5. So we issue the size plus 2G. G standing for gigabytes. You can use megabytes. And space minus N for new. So here is where we give the volume group, well, the first volume group its name, and we're going to call this one prod space, and we want to put it on to the resource VG RESOU. And that's going to also be mounted on dev SDB3. Enter. Logical volume prod created, and LV display is how you view the logical volumes. This is the swap from the original OS. If you go up, this is the root from the original OS, and at the top we have prod for the new group, and it's 2 GB in size, and it's available, so on and so forth. So now, after we create the logical volume, we have to format it. If you take a look at the logical volume we just created for prod, it is not formatted, right? So we have to format it. We want to format the volume group to ext4, and we can run the fdisk command minus L to see that the logical volume that we want to format is going to be here. It's going to be this path right here. Dev mapper volume group logical volume. The format is going to be mkfs.ext4 dev mapper. Then we go volume group, which is resource. That's prod. Hit enter. So the information is routed to the disk. And if we do another LV display, correction, if we run another lsblk, we see that now resource prod is formatted and it has a UUID. The only thing now is not mounted to anything. So we have to mount it. I'm just going to move to the root directory. Take a look here. We don't have any directories called prod, so we're going to create a directory, mkdir. We are going to call this prod, and then we are going to mount dev mapper resource prod to prod to /prod, because note we created the prod directory under the root file system, so it has to be root file system prod. We hit enter, and if we run the command mount, we can see that dev mapper resource prod is mounted onto prod as an ext4. And to see disk free for prod, 2 gigs, 1.9 available, and 3 megabytes used, because it's probably that lost and found. Yep, because of the lost and found directory. So now that we can do LV display, and we are going to see at the top that our resource prod is mounted onto the prod logical volume is mounted on the volume group resource, read write, and the amount of space is used, and it's available. If we take a look at our volume group, for resource, we're going to see that we have 5 gigabytes available out of the 7 that was originally allocated to this partition, because 2 is being used for the new logical volume. So we clear the screen, and we can continue to build upon this. So now we are going to create another logical volume with LV create and the same command minus capital L to issue the blocks. So we want this logical volume to be 2.5 gigs. But this time we're going to issue it with the megabyte block issuer, size issuer. If we want a total of 2.5 gigs, that's going to be 2,500 megabytes. So we issue the command minus L plus 2500M minus N. For new, we are going to issue this one is going to be called pre-prod, and on the resource volume group, SOURCE, onto dev SDB3. So the pre-prod logical volume was created, and now we want to format it also to ext4, mkfs.ext4 with the dev mapper, the one we used to format the previous logical volume, dev mapper we want to issue the volume group first, resource dash pre-prod. And it's writing. Okay, so now that it's formatted, we have to create a directory to mount it on. So we're already in the root file system. So mkdir pre-prod. And then we're going to mount dev mapper resource pre-prod onto, we already in the root file system. So we can just type in pre-prod. Just to be clear, the reason that I am not putting the / in front of pre-prod is because we are already in the root file system. So it's mounted. Just to make sure, we run the mount command and we see that resource pre-prod is mounted on pre-prod. And if we was to take we run the lsblk command and we see that now they are mounted and formatted. And LV display is going to show the sizes of them. LV size 2.44. That's representative of 2.5. In order to be able to use these directories consistently, even after the machine restarts, we have to make them persistent. And the way we make them persistent is to add the UUIDs into the FS tab. So if we run command blk ID, block ID, we see that resource prod, so a couple things we can do. We can just echo both of these absolute paths. So I can either type it in or copy it, highlight, right click, paste, space, highlight the second one. Let's get rid of the colons at the end and quotations. And we want to append, add to the bottom of the file. We want to append to the Etsy FS tab. So I hit enter. And then if I go into the Etsy FS tab, we'll see that they're both at the bottom. It's fine with the formatting. We're okay with this. For right now, we're gonna fix it from here. Enter. So we save the file. And we have completely created the logical volume with the new disk, the directories that were created for them. If you like the content that we are providing over here at MTS, please like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.